All right, we're back on the record. Ladies and gentlemen in the audience, let me remind you, like I did yesterday, that you are not allowed to have your cell phones out while you are in the courtroom. They need to be in your pockets, backpacks, purses, but not out. If you are found with your cell phone out, you will be asked to leave the courtroom and not allowed back in. I don't want to have to do that. I want you all to be able to stay through the rest of the trial, so please, please heed that warning. All right, counsel, are we ready to bring the jury back into the courtroom?
Judge, before we begin, we have just discussed a photograph that I think we can stipulate that can be added to the defendant's exhibit list as number 5.
Okay.
And
All right.
I will just put it up there without, I'm not going to use it as part of my examination of Brett, but we will use it probably in closing. It correlates with one of the photographs of the...
Well, it has to come in with it.
Yeah, it's going to need to come in through a witness so that the jury can hear that it's been admitted into evidence in case they're keeping track of the numbering of the exhibits.
That's why I thought we could maybe stipulate it, because the only witness I can put it in through would be Jason Vance, I think.
Oh, okay.
Well, he's actually here.
Is he?
Well, or I can just tell the jury that you all have agreed that this exhibit comes into evidence as defense exhibit number 1. Number 5 as defense exhibit number 5, and that they're to consider this just as they would any other piece of evidence.
That's what I was
If you're fine
hoping
with
we
that.
could do, yes.
Well, the thing is, they won't know when it was taken or who took it, because you can't just put it in there.
I don't know what it's a picture of. What are we looking at?
Yeah, approach.
Sure.
That's a picture of Taylor.
Oh,
My concern is that the testimony from Jason Vance was that they were blackout curtains, and I think that shows that they weren't blackout curtains.
That's a crime scene unit, that's one of the photos. It's not one that was shown, but it is one that was taken. That's more like a close-up. We have it, and we can show it on the screen. We can, but you're not gonna use it with his testimony.
He didn't know what was in that room. I mean, my concern is that Jason Vance said these are blackout curtains, which implies that you can't, there's a black sheet behind them that you can't see through them. I think this clearly shows that there is light behind there. You can see that there is, you know, his defense says he saw muzzle flashes.
is this? I can't really tell. Is this taken from inside,
Yes.
looking out?
I don't think you can just use that without a witness. I think he's gonna have to be.
So you said Jason Vance is here, in the courthouse, or just here?
He's here in the witness room.
Oh, do you want to just put him back on just for that
Yeah.
purpose to get this picture in? Okay, that's fine.
We'll show it on the screen as well.
Okay.
Okay, that's fine. We'll do it that way. All right, I think we're ready to bring the jury in. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Anything to report from the overnight break? All right. As you heard yesterday, the Commonwealth closed its case. They have rested, and so now it's the defense opportunity to present evidence if they so choose, but they are not required to do so. Mr. Matthews?
Judge, we would like to start out by calling Jason Vance back to the stand. Please.
All right. Do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you. And again, you may take your mask off while you testify.
Sergeant, would you state your name again for the record, please?
Sergeant Jason Vance.
And you are with the PIU unit of the LMPD, is that correct?
Not currently, no.
You were at the time of March 12th, 13th, 2020?
Yes, sir.
And you were the lead investigator in the case that occurred on that date? Would that be a fair characterization?
On May 14th, yes.
You became the lead investigator on May 14th?
Correct.
I would like to, may I approach, Judge?
You may.
I would like at this time to show you a photograph which has been marked Defendant's Exhibit 5. Ask you if you can recognize that.
Yes.
Would you explain to ladies and gentlemen of the jury what that is?
So that's the living room curtains.
Is that living room or bedroom?
I stand corrected. I do see this in the right corner. Looks like maybe this is a portion of the bed that's been propped up. Yeah, so this would be the south bedroom, and it's a curtain. I believe I described it as a blackout curtain that was in front of blinds on the window in that south bedroom.
And what is your definition of a blackout curtain?
Any kind of material, cloth material or curtain type material that would be used to block out light, so there would be no illumination in that room. So a person could sleep in there in darkness.
And can you tell from that curtain that in fact light is visible through it?
So, judging on the backdrop of this photograph, it looks like that it is daylight now, and that you can see some light through that material. Yes.
You don't know what time that photo was taken, correct?
I do not know when this was taken. If I had the digital copy, I would, but I don't. Not this photograph. This
Judge,
photograph.
now that it's been identified, can we publish it?
Any objection to it being admitted into evidence? No objection. All right, it'll be so admitted. Yes, you may publish it.
Is there enough information on that? I don't think there's any that you can determine what time it was taken.
No, not in this format.
Okay. Thank you. I have nothing further.
Cross-examination?
Sergeant Vance, that photo, I just saw, could you put it back up?
I'll bring it back up.
In this particular photo, can you see the blinds that were behind the curtain?
Yes.
Now, I would like to show you, refer back to the Commonwealth's Exhibit 45. So if you would look at this, there we go. Those are the blinds that would have been behind the curtains in the photo you just described.
Correct.
Correct? This photo obviously is taken in the daylight,
Yes.
and this photo, as the previous photo, was taken after bullets went through
Correct.
and created the holes both in the blinds and the curtains. Correct?
Correct.
After the bullets went through.
Correct.
Okay. Nothing further.
No redirect, Your Honor.
All right, you can step down. Thank you. Your next witness?
Brett Hankison.
If you raise your right hand, do you solemnly swear the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
Thank you.
Brett, will you start out by stating your name for the record, please?
Brett Hankison,
Keep your voice up so everybody can hear. How old are you?
45.
You married?
I'm not.
Do you have any children?
I do.
How many?
Just one.
And what is your child? A boy, a girl?
She is 18 years old.
And what does she do?
She is a freshman at a state university.
Okay. What is your educational background?
I graduated high school from Logan High School. That's a small town in rural southeast Ohio. And after graduating there, I attended Capital University, which is a small private school just outside. It's in Bexley, Ohio, which is just a suburb of Columbus, Ohio. And after my freshman year there of completion, I then transferred to the University of Cincinnati, where I completed my bachelor's degree.
And what did you receive a bachelor's degree in?
My degree was a Bachelor of Science degree in criminal justice.
And when did you graduate from the University of Cincinnati?
In 1998.
What did you do after you graduated?
I graduated in 98, and then in 1999, I was accepted into the Lexington Fayette Urban County Police Academy, and that is in Lexington, Kentucky.
Did you complete the academy and become a Lexington police officer?
I did.
How long did you serve in the city of Lexington?
Just under 3 years.
What did you do then?
I was assigned to the East Sector. Fayette County is divided into 3 sectors, East, West, and Central Patrol Divisions. And I was assigned my entire length of my stay there after my field training phase in East Sector, which is the eastern portion of Fayette County.
And you said you were at Lexington for 3 years?
Just under.
What did you do next?
I lateral transferred, is what it's officially called.
Explain to the jury what lateral transfer means.
Sure. It's when you're already certified as a police officer in your state or Commonwealth, depending. And some departments offer a lateral transfer program where you can, when you're accepted to their department, you can take an abbreviated academy. So say, for instance, my academy in Lexington was 30-some weeks. And when I went to the Jefferson County Police Department and took their lateral class with the other people that were in my class, they were also former police officers. And it's an abbreviated academy, like I mentioned, and it's about 6 to 8 weeks long. I don't remember exactly what.
So you graduated from the Jefferson County Police Academy?
Well, yes and no. I started with the Jefferson County Police Department and the Police Academy at Southfields. And between the time that the academy was going on, the county and city governments merged to Metro Louisville.
And the 2 police departments merged also?
That's correct.
And that's what we now know today as the LMPD, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So how long were you with the LMPD?
Up until 2020, from 2003 up until 2020.
And what happened in 2020
Are you referring to
with
the
your
night?
employment?
I was terminated.
As Chief Conrad testified the other day?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And that was a result of the incident that brings us to court here, correct?
That's correct.
Now, when you were with LMPD, what type of assignments did you have over your years?
I started off in the patrol division for Jefferson County, which changed in the middle of the academy to Louisville Metro. And we actually graduated. We were the first graduating class in our Louisville Metro. It was a combined Jefferson County Police Department, or Jefferson County Police Academy, a City of Louisville Police Academy, and then our lateral academy. We're all lumped into the same, all three groups of us were lumped into the same, and we were essentially the first graduating class under Louisville Metro.
When you came out of the academy, where were you assigned?
I was assigned to Charlie District.
Which is what?
Charlie District was when we had city divisions and county divisions. They were still divided. That was a county police division, and that was situated in Fairdale, on Fairdale Road.
And what was your role there with Charlie Division?
With Charlie District, I was mainly responsible for patrol functions, answering 911 calls, that type of thing.
And did your role with the LMPD change over the years?
It did.
Did you have different assignments?
Yes.
Can you discuss some of those?
Sure. So with merger, eventually, and I don't know the exact time frame, but they dissolved the city divisions and county divisions and made 8 patrol divisions for Jefferson County. So the entire county of Jefferson is divided into 8 separate patrol divisions. The city and county were done away with. So I moved from the Charlie district, which was the county police division in the county and the rural area of Fairdale. I was transferred to the Newburgh area, which was with the creation of the 6th division.
And what did you do there?
I performed a similar function. I was a patrol officer assigned to the Newburgh and Norfolk neighborhood.
At some point, you became involved with narcotics investigations, is that correct?
Correct.
Did you do anything before that? Were you always a patrol officer and then you got into the narcotics?
Well, what happened is that a position came open, used to be called a flex platoon. Each division has what we called a flex platoon. We had similar with the city and county police, and then once we merged, we also, each of the 8 divisions had their own flex platoon. A flex platoon is essentially a street-level narcotics unit. It's we don't wear uniforms, we don't have cars, or we don't have marked cars. We just have regular plainclothes cars, from cars to trucks to minivans. We just have with no markings on them. So we don't wear a regular police uniform. And we're responsible for, we're at the discretion of each major in each division, but we do any functions that they want or any problem issues or problem areas, hot spots that they might have. And that can be anything from car break-ins to thefts from a particular area or construction area. And we also do everything as involved responding to the narcotics complaints that come through MetroSafe.
When did you, what happened with the flex unit?
The flex units were eventually dissolved, I guess,
And-
by the administration.
Okay, we've heard testimony that you were part of CID on March the 12th and 13th, 2020. How did that come about?
So, as I was a member of the Flex Division and the 6th Division, which is the Newburgh area, I then, there was an opening posted for the major case unit in Metro Narcotics. So, me and others had applied, interviewed, and I was promoted to that position in Metro Narcotics major case unit.
And what did that involve?
Major case unit works directly we have a few task force officers assigned by Lmpd to the FBI, the ATF, to DEA from our major case unit. So we work hand in hand with those federal agencies on a regular basis, and we concentrate on everything from mid-level drug dealing to all the way up to the highest level of anything imported into the county. Now, if we were to identify a target that was bringing in, say, a large amount of fentanyl or heroin, our federal task force officers would take over that role because they had the federal jurisdiction, whereas we don't do many investigations outside of Jefferson County.
And then, how long were you with that unit or that division?
I was with Major Case Unit. Now, like I said, that's not CID. That's before CID was created. That was when it was just Metro Narcotics. And I was with Major Case Unit for approximately 3 or 4 years. But within that time frame, a position had came open for a canine handler within Metro Narcotics.
Okay, and that was how long ago?
I would say it would be somewhere around 2014 or 2015.
Did you become a canine handler at that point?
I did.
And did your assignments change at all then?
I was still assigned to the Major Case Unit, and I was the canine dog for the Major Case Unit, so I didn't really leave my platoon. I stayed, just had a different function. I wasn't actually going out and writing the search warrants and getting the affidavits and doing the investigation and case files. I was more of just a canine function, which essentially we come in after the fact to the scene to do a search of a vehicle, a car, a person, whatever that might be.
May I approach, Judge?
You may.
First off, Brett,
What was the name of your dog?
Franklin,
And how long did you have Frank?
for approximately a little over 5 years, I believe.
And was he, we've heard testimony during the course of the trial that there are different types of canine officers, for want of a better word. Was he a specifically trained dog?
He was.
For what?
Franklin was trained specifically for the detection of narcotics odor. We have two separate units within Metro Police. Are the Canine Patrol Division, and those are canine dogs that ride around in a police car with a handler with a uniform and say canine on the vehicle. And then we have a group of dogs that are assigned strictly to do narcotics detection only, which are separate from the canine unit.
And what do the canine narcotics dogs do specifically?
Specifically, they detect the odor of 4 specific drugs, that being heroin, cocaine, meth, and marijuana. They're all trained on those 4 odors.
And is that something that you participate in training?
I did participate in training. We had a lot of training, but when I got the dog was already, my partner Franklin was already imprinted on odor. So he had learned from a previous handler at a specific time prior to me. So I did not train Franklin on odor. Franklin came already trained on the odor and to alert on the odor.
Did you continue to train with him?
We trained weekly, yes, sir.
And what was the weekly training?
We have a 4-hour training session on Wednesdays, and we had to complete that in a passing grade with the instructor.
And what did that involve?
That would be at different locations throughout Metro Louisville, parking lots, buildings, schools, lockers. It could be anywhere, but those odors were previously hidden by the trainer, and then we had to score a specific alert on a number of hides. A hide is just any amount of drugs that's put out and hidden, and we have to find.
Judge, may I approach the witness?
You may.
Brett, at this time, I'd like to hand you 2 photographs marked Defendants Exhibits 2 and 3, and just ask you if you can identify.
Yes.
Do you know when they were taken?
I do not off the top of my head, but it was a couple years after we had been together as a team.
And were you present?
Yes.
Judge, I'd ask that the photographs be admitted as evidence.
Jack to one of those, and they've been numbered.
Yes, 3 is the one you object.
Yeah,
Counsel,
Jack.
will you come forward, please?
Okay, Brett, so you indicated that you trained weekly with Franklin, correct?
Correct.
Did you have any other roles within your career with the Louisville Metro Police Department?
Yes.
Such as?
The Metro Narcotics Unit, as I referred to, when we merged with the Mobile 9th Division at the time, which was previously Viper, and we became the Criminal Interdiction Division, or as you've heard referred to as CID.
And CID exists today, correct?
Correct.
How is that made up?
Numerous platoons throughout CID, and I think it's changed even, it evolves and has different platoons names, but at the time that I was there, it was broken up into different platoons. One of those platoons was a prescription fraud unit. You had 2 units, which were the Violent Crime Street Unit, 2 platoons that were the Complaint Response Unit, also known as Crew, and the Major Case Unit, and the PBI Unit.
The PBI unit was place-based investigations?
Correct.
Okay, and when you say different platoons, did they each have a certain number of officers assigned?
They did. Each platoon was broken up, and I don't think there's a specific number, but around 8 detectives, and then each platoon has a sergeant assigned to that unit or that platoon.
And do the officers intermingle or switch off platoons, or are they pretty much you're assigned to this platoon, that's where you work?
Each platoon has a different working shift, but some of those platoons overlap their shifts. So let's just say a Violent Crime Unit 1 and Complaint Response Unit 2 would work similar schedules. So those 2 platoons would work together, say they had a search warrant and they needed extra bodies or whatnot, resources, they would work together on that particular day.
Okay. How many officers, if you know or can approximate, were assigned to CID?
I would say somewhere between, without command staff, I'd say somewhere between around 60 to 70 detectives.
And you were a detective at that time, correct?
Correct.
What platoon were you assigned to?
Upon the night of the shooting, I was assigned to the Complaint Response Unit number 2.
Okay, and did you work with that platoon solely, or were you moving around?
Being a canine handler, we are technically assigned to platoons, and that's the platoon we're with, normally speaking, but we are called off throughout the day to other requests for canine searches. So our sergeants are very lenient as far as they don't really, how do I say it? They know that we're not going to be there with our platoon because we're a canine handler. So they know we're going to be all over the city essentially, and it's not a thing where you have to constantly call and ask your sergeant, can I go here, can I go here? But they know you're doing canine searches, which is outside the scope of what that unit does specifically. But if they were to need, obviously, you for a search, they would call you, and that would be your priority.
Did you participate in any kind of administrative function within LMPD?
I did.
What was that?
I was assigned for approximately 6 years. There was a break, but approximately 5 to 6 years, I was a member of the Louisville Metro Police Merit Board.
What is the Louisville Police Merit Board?
The Louisville Metro Police Merit Board was created as a governing body for officers within LMPD who are disciplined as a way to appeal their disciplinary action if they didn't feel, say, the chief gave a fair discipline for whatever they had done, department allegations. They would come to the merit board and plead their case to the merit board.
And the merit board consisted of different types of people?
Yes, sir. It consists of 5 civilians and two sworn officers within LMPD.
And you were one of the sworn officers?
I was.
And you did that for how long?
Between 5 and 6 years.
Now, have you ever, during the course of your career, served search warrants?
I have.
Approximately how many, if you know?
I would say somewhere between 800 and 1,000.
And is that because you have a dog?
It is. It's very uncommon that high of a number for a regular narcotics detective, but like I just mentioned, with our being a canine handler, I might go to 3 search warrants a night, and I would go from one to the other. I would make entry with that platoon on the search warrant, and then after the scene was secured, and if I can go into that real briefly, we don't, with a canine narcotics detection dog, he's not trained to bite or track. He's a passive, or my dog was a passive indicator for the odor of narcotics. So say there was marijuana underneath that door, my dog would go over to the door, put his nose on the odor as close as he could get to it without moving something, and he would lay down and stare at that odor until he was given his reward. I lost my train of thought there.
You were discussing what, you lost my train of thought too, by the way. You're talking about serving search warrants.
So yes, sorry. So I would go to that scene. We would secure the location with whatever platoon I went to help or assist with, and then I would, once the scene was secured, everybody was out or secured in wherever location we're at, then I brought Franklin out. He did not make entry with us as far as that goes.
And these locations were all over the area, correct?
Anywhere in Jefferson County.
And how many did you do on a regular basis?
It could be, you mean on a daily basis?
Daily basis?
It could be anywhere between 1 and 3.
Okay. Have you ever discharged your weapon, your service weapon, in the line of duty?
I have not.
Have you ever been shot at in the line of duty?
I have not.
On
Prior to March 13th.
On March the 13th, March 12th, 13th, what kind of service weapon were you equipped with?
A Glock Model 22, 40 caliber.
And is that the weapon that we've seen displayed here in court?
I believe so.
Was that, do you have any reason to doubt it?
No,
Okay. Was that weapon issued to you by the LMPD?
it was.
And was it had ammunition, correct?
Correct.
Where'd the ammunition come from?
That was issued by the range,
By the,
Metro Police, the
Okay.
range, firearms training range.
was your weapon equipped with a light,
It was.
flashlight on March 12th, 13th?
It was.
And we saw demonstrated, I believe yesterday, how that light fits on the barrel of the weapon,
It fits on the rail, yes, sir.
on the rail. And did you have the light on March 12th, March 13th that was equipped with one, correct?
I did. That was not that was I purchased that myself. That wasn't an issued item at that time.
Was it approved by the department?
It was.
Did you turn it on or activate it on December 12th, 13th?
I did not.
Why not?
The reason being is that we were approaching, it was dark outside, and we don't illuminate any flashlights or want any illumination on us while we're approaching a specific location.
And why? What is the reason for that?
Just to give away our location. We don't want to give away our location, and that it would do that if somebody, say, looked out their window or whatnot.
Did you also have a handheld light that night?
I did. I was issued a small, I believe it's a Stinger flashlight, which is approximately 12 inches.
Where do you carry that?
I usually carry it in my tactical vest.
Which you had on the 12th, 13th?
I did.
Brett, are you familiar with the LMPD use of deadly force policy?
I am.
May I approach the witness, Judge?
You may.
Brett, I'm going to hand you a two-page document that's marked Defendant's Exhibit Number 4 and ask you if you recognize that.
I do.
And what is it?
It's the SOP as it relates to use of force with an LMPD.
And how are you familiar with that?
We are given policies through email. That's not accurate. We're given whenever there's an update on policy or a new policy comes out, we're having an email alert. You just click on the link and it takes you to the new policy or whatever changes are highlighted in yellow with each policy. You have to read through that policy, and then it's an electronic form, or I'm sorry, yeah, it's an electronic form, but after you scroll to the bottom, you check that you've read it and understand the policy, and then it's checked off in the main system.
And Judge, may I ask that that be admitted as Exhibit 4 for the defendant, please?
Objection, may we approach?
You may approach.
Brett, can you explain to the ladies and gentlemen of the jury your understanding of the LMPD use of deadly force policy?
Sure. Deadly force is permitted within the scope that an officer faces a deadly force threat, and that could be through serious physical injury or possible death, whatever threat that might be. So it's not limited to, say, a firearms or a club or whatever, but if an officer identifies a potential threat that would end in serious physical injury to death to that officer or to a civilian, we are allowed to use deadly force.
And discharging your firearm would be considered deadly force, is that correct?
It would.
And
Yes,
somebody actively shooting at you would be considered a threat worthy of using deadly force on, is that correct?
absolutely.
Let's talk about this March 12th and March 13th. Do you remember those 2 days?
I do.
Okay, what were you doing on those days?
On March 12th and 13th, I believe those were my normally assigned days off.
Do you recall that that was a Thursday and a Friday?
I do.
And what did you do on Thursday, March 12th on your regular day off?
I believe I had court early in the morning. I don't recall if it was circuit or district court, but I had a court appearance that was required on that early that morning.
And what did you do after you finished your court appearance?
The U.S. Marshals Task Force had requested detectives to assist them in what they call a roundup, and we're not really involved in the identification, but it's wanted fugitives throughout Louisville Metro. They identify those people, and we assist them on attempting to locate those people.
And did you do that?
I did.
Do you remember what time you finished with that?
I don't recall, but it was somewhere in the evening hours.
What did you do after that?
I then went to the CID office, which is at 701 West Ormsby.
How did you know to go to the CID office?
I had been advised of multiple search warrants through the PBI unit, the Place-Based Investigations Unit, a week or so previously. Sergeant Meany with the PBI unit had sent out an email requesting additional support for the warrant service of I think there were 4, but possibly 5 warrant services which were going to go simultaneously.
Okay, when you say warrant services, you mean separate search warrants for different addresses?
Correct.
And was one of those Springfield?
It was.
Okay, how did you said you were asked by email?
Yes, there was a request put out for support from the other platoons to assist the PBI unit, and I responded that myself and my partner Franklin were available.
And were they specifically looking for somebody who had a canine?
Yeah, each location, they wanted a canine to be able to be on scene at each of the 4 locations, and like I said, I believe there were 5, but there was never a 5th. The 5th location on Muhammad Ali was not served that night, but they had a dog assigned to each of those locations.
Okay, and the Ormsby address where the CID office is located is your home base, kind of, is that correct?
That's where our office is, correct.
So you responded there about what time?
I would say between 9 and 10 p.m.
And do you know how many people were there at that point?
No, but it was pretty packed, especially for that time of night in the office.
And why?
Because of the multiple warrant services and the request for the manpower.
Is there a specific number of officers who are supposed to serve a warrant at a location?
I don't believe there's a policy that stipulates a minimum or a maximum amount of people, but obviously the more people you have, the better.
And when you went to the CID, what was the point of going there?
The CID was the location where we were directed to go by the PBI unit or the PBI sergeant, I don't recall which, to do the briefing.
And was SWAT there at that briefing?
No, SWAT has their own headquarters, I guess, and that's not near where our location is.
So everybody at the briefing that you attended was with CID, correct?
Correct.
And what was the nature of that briefing? What did they talk about?
They had a whiteboard as you walk in the main or the large conference room. They have a large whiteboard that you can write on with a marker.
We saw a photograph of that. Is that what the evidence the Commonwealth had? The photograph?
It is. I think a picture of the whiteboard was shown multiple times.
Okay.
And we all, at whatever time, they rounded us up and told us, because a lot of us were at our desks or cubicles doing work, and we were called into the office to start the briefing.
And when you say called into the office, is this a big room and everybody was in it?
It's our office is pretty large, but it's cubicles kind of as far as you can see, and then there's a large conference room and a small conference room, and the PBI unit already set up the whiteboard in the large conference room.
And when you walked in, did you see the whiteboard?
I did.
Did you locate your name on it?
I did.
Did you know in advance that you were going to be assigned to the warrant service on Springfield Drive?
No, sir.
Did it make any difference to you where you went?
Did not.
Did you know the names of the officers that were on that whiteboard assigned to Springfield?
Some of them, yes, I was familiar with, I had worked with in the past, and then, like I said, we had recently merged with the Mobile 9th Division, and they had a lot of younger guys, younger detectives, and I wasn't familiar with everybody in that unit. So a couple of names, one in particular I didn't recognize right off the bat.
On the list to go to Springfield?
Correct.
So the list to go to Springfield was not a platoon that worked together on a daily basis?
It was not. The people that were on the board to go to Springfield were literally, every detective there, I believe, was from a different platoon. So it wasn't someone we worked with on a daily basis as a team.
Does that make a difference in the service of a warrant?
I would say, yeah.
Why?
Because you're not used to working with certain people, do certain things differently. Some people have different roles they like to do. Some people like to do the RAM. Some people like to do the pick. And some people like to make first entry.
What's a pick?
A pick is just a large steel bar that has, it looks like an extra large crowbar, and it's used to pry doors open with.
And did you have a specific assignment at 3003 Springfield?
As a entry or as of why I was there for?
Why were you there?
I was there for the canine search.
Okay. So you were supposed to go in after entry was made, correct?
Well, yes, but if we're there upon the search warrant, they obviously want additional help in making entry. Because like I said, the more detectives, the better that are there. And I was put, and I don't know who did the whiteboard, but I was put in a stack with the other detectives.
Was the order of the names on the whiteboard, did that signify anything?
Yes and no. And the reason I say that was a couple of the officers' names that were on the board, detectives rather, never made it to the scene for whatever reason, I don't know.
So, but it ended up that there were 7 officers who went to Springfield, right?
Yes, sir.
What was discussed at the briefing at CID?
They explained, they had all the addresses of the search warrants that night. They explained to us that the Elliott Avenue addresses were going to be served by the SWAT team, and that Springfield was going to be served by us.
And did they tell you go into detail about each of those addresses?
Well, let me go back, because I kind of skipped an important part. While SWAT team was going to serve, say, 2624 Elliott, it's not that once the SWAT team makes entry and clears and everything's clear with inside, everybody's in custody or detained, then the CID unit will come in. The SWAT team basically goes in, does the tactical stuff, secures it, then we come in after the fact, and then we interview, do a search, execute the warrant, basically.
But SWAT was not part of Springfield, is that correct?
Correct. SWAT was assigned to the other addresses on Elliott.
Do you know why SWAT was not part of Springfield?
I have no idea.
You didn't have anything to do with the investigation that led to the issuance of the search warrant for Springfield?
No, sir, I had no idea.
When you were at the briefing at CID, did they go into any detail about, what did they tell you about Springfield that you might encounter?
I believe they had, excuse me, they had pictures of targets on Elliott, and then I believe they either had a name or a picture, I don't recall which, of Miss Taylor at Springfield.
And what did they tell you?
Essentially, that Miss Taylor had no record to speak of, and she was home at that location at that time, and that they had tied her to, or I'm sorry, had tied a known drug trafficker coming and going to that location.
Did they give you any description of the physical layout of the building?
No, they did not.
No diagrams?
No diagrams, no, sir.
Any photographs?
No, sir.
Who conducted that briefing?
I believe it was done by Detective Barton with PBI.
And how long did that last?
I want to say somewhere between 10 to 20 minutes.
Was the rest of the, or was there also information provided about the addresses on Elliott and the other search warrant locations?
They provided, I believe, the names of some targets, but I didn't recognize anybody's name on the board. I never interacted with anyone whose name was up there. I wasn't familiar with them.
What happened when the briefing was completed?
After the briefing was completed, it was someone, I'm assuming Sergeant Mattingly or Lieutenant Hoover told us to go to a rally location, is what we call it. It's basically a location near the search warrant where we will wait until we're advised to move into position on the location.
Okay, you indicated you didn't have anything to do with the investigation that led to the issuance of the search warrant, correct?
No, sir.
Did you have anything to do with preparing that search warrant?
No, sir.
What did you do? You just showed up?
Yeah, I was requested to be there, and I let them know that through email, confirmed that I could be there and that I was off.
Now, at the rally point, where was that?
St. Andrew's Church and St. Anthony Church Drive, where those two roads intersect, there is, I believe, a church there, and we all met up in the parking lot there.
And when you all met up there, how did everybody get there?
Either drove or rode with each other. I don't recall how everybody got there, but that's how I got there.
More than one vehicle?
Yes,
And you have your own vehicle, correct?
correct.
And where was Franklin?
He was in the back in a kennel.
And when you got to the church on St. Anthony, what happened there?
I was one of the last ones that arrived there, so people were kind of parked just throughout the parking lot, and there was a EMS wagon there also.
Is that standard procedure?
Yes. Anytime we serve a search warrant, usually it's a responsibility of the lead detective to call MetroSafe, either radio or telephone, and ask for an EMS wagon with advanced life support on board to stand by at that location with us, which is going to be close to the service of the warrant in case something should go wrong.
Okay. At the parking lot, was there any more planning with reference to what was going to happen when you got to 3003 Springfield?
To the best of my knowledge, no. Basically, that's where we put our tactical vest on, and those that had specific jobs, like Detective Nobles with the Ram, would get the equipment out and make sure it's ready, and all equipment was checked, essentially.
And then everybody proceeded to Springfield?
Correct.
How did you get there?
I drove my police vehicle.
Okay. When we went out the other day, there's a street right off of St. Anthony's that goes directly back to the apartment. We've heard testimony about a gate. Did you know of the existence of the gate?
I did not.
Did you go in that way?
We did not that night.
Why not?
I'm assuming because the gate was there, I didn't know anything about the gate. I had never been at that complex before. I had never made a run there or worked in the 3rd Division, so I was not familiar with that area whatsoever.
And if I understood the testimony we've heard throughout this trial, there was an officer already on the scene at Springfield, correct?
That's correct.
And that was Detective Mike Campbell?
It was.
What was his role?
Now, like I said previously, we were advised at the CID office at the briefing that Detective Campbell with PBI was already on scene, and he was going to be our VO, is what we call it, but that's a verification officer. To my best of my knowledge, he was the only person from the PBI unit that had explicit knowledge of that location and everything to do with the investigation leading up to it. I believe either Detective Barton or Sergeant Meany relayed that to us within the briefing, that he was already on scene and he had an eye on the location, meaning he could visibly see an obstructed view of the front door to the target location.
And was he supposed to do anything with reference to that?
Your only job as a verification officer is to do constant surveillance on the location. And the reason we do that is a couple reasons, but one, I'll take it for instance, if there's children show up at the apartment, or I'm sorry, at the location, in this case it's an apartment, if additional people show up and go into the target location, that's all information that we need to be relayed to us, so we are aware of that upon making entry, or sometimes with children involved, we will just decide not to do the warrant whatsoever.
To your knowledge, was any information provided by Detective Campbell about any changes at the location or what was going on at the location?
No changes. From what we were told from the briefing, that Detective Campbell was on scene with a constant eye on the location, and that Miss Taylor was there by herself, and there was no children, and there was no pets, to our knowledge. It's also important if there's a dog or a large dog on the location prior to our arrival.
You got that at the briefing at CID, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. When everybody arrived on Springfield, how did they get to the actual parking lot in front of the apartment?
So we actually passed, like I said, I wasn't familiar with the area, but we passed the actual street that goes to Springfield, and I later found out the reason we did because there was a gate there. But we went past, so I guess that would be considered south, up the hill to a different entrance, and then moved through the parking lot in a caravan of police vehicles. Those are all unmarked. We snaked down through the parking lot until we got to near 3003.
And what did you do when you got near 3003?
There was a parking spot just east of the target location, and there was a parking spot near a dumpster, and I parked my Suburban there.
And what did you do?
Got out of the vehicle.
Did you get Franklin out with you?
I did not. He doesn't, like I said, he doesn't come out until after the scene is secured.
Did Franklin ever come out of your vehicle that night? After you got out of your vehicle, what did you do?
I walked up, and I believe I was maybe the last vehicle in the caravan or the second to last vehicle in the caravan. So by the time I parked, some people just parked in the parking lot and not in the parking place, but kind of double parked in the middle of the lot. And because I'd found an open spot, I was kind of farther away from everybody. So I kind of did a brisk jog, walk, catch up to everybody else that was already positioned on the sidewalk. And I believe that would be just east of 3003 building.
Everybody was on the sidewalk?
Correct.
And was there any discussion about what was going to happen?
No, Detective Campbell, I believe, had exited his vehicle, and like I said, he was the verification officer, and he's the one that either gave the specific location, the door, that's his job, to Detective Mattingly or Sergeant Mattingly or some detective that was in the front of the line. So at that time, I was positioned a little farther back in the line.
Okay, now we've seen photographs of a white Toyota Sequoia parked, I guess you'd call it double parked, in the parking lot right opposite the entrance to the vestibule area.
Correct.
Did you know about that from Detective Campbell?
I had no knowledge of that vehicle or why it was there.
Did that make any difference in how you were going to go about service of the search warrant?
At that point, no.
Okay. So the plan was to just go ahead and make entry to apartment 4, correct?
Correct.
Did you know of the existence of an apartment behind apartment 4 or attached to apartment 4, such as apartment 3?
No, sir.
When you first laid eyes on the building, what did you think about that building?
Like I said, I had no information, no Google image or any satellite imagery of the location. Upon walking, like I said, it was, now it was probably sometime after midnight, and as we proceeded up, obviously it was dark, the parking lot lights were on. I noticed as I approached the building to my right, I could see 2 balconies, and then I could see 2 patios directly below that. So at that time, I assumed it was a fourplex.
Meaning 4 apartments in the building?
2 up and 2 down. Yes, sir.
Did you see 4 doors in the vestibule?
I did not.
Did you pay any attention to that?
No, and a couple reasons. Not that I wasn't paying attention, but there's no way I could see that. Before my approach from the east, we walked up in a stack, which I think has been described numerous times. In prior testimony, I was near the rear of the stack, so I hadn't made it into the vestibule area with the other detectives. I was maybe one of the last ones to do that.
Okay, well, I'm not real clear about the formation of the stack. Is that just a single file line, every one person right after the other?
Correct. We usually, upon approach to a target location, we usually, what we call stack up, and we get in a line, a single file line as it is, and that's the point where we're usually very near the target location, and that's when we unholster our firearms.
Okay. Pardon me, and as you did that, then you made your way up the sidewalk into the vestibule area, correct?
Correct. We walked past the target apartment, which would be the 2-bedroom windows, and then the sliding glass door.
And did you take note of those?
I just noted that there was no activity to speak of. Obviously, somebody will usually call out if there's an open window or they see somebody inside or somebody's looking out the window, they'll alert you to that, but there was no reason for me to take specific notice of it at that time.
Okay. When you entered the vestibule area, what, if anything, happened?
As I entered the vestibule area, most all the detectives in the stack were in front of me, and I believe Detective Campbell was behind me at that time.
And so he would have been the last one in, correct?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Did you encounter anybody?
I did. Sergeant Mattingly, I believe, began knocking on the door of apartment 4.
And when you say knocking, can you describe how he was knocking?
Sure, just with a closed fist or this palm striking the door repeatedly while announcing our presence.
And when you say while announcing our presence, what specifically was being said?
Police, search warrant, and that was said over and over. And I don't know if it was Metro Police search warrant or police search warrant over and over again.
How would you describe the noise level?
It was a loud banging. And I think that sound was kind of intensified because in that vestibule area, it's all concrete, and then you have a steel structure for the steps, I believe.
So did that get a response from anywhere?
The apartment directly above the target apartment, on apartment 4, that's when I observed who I know now to be Mr. Sarpe exit that door.
And where did he go?
He came out, took a couple steps out, and addressed us.
Okay. He was not on the deck out above the patio to apartment 4, correct?
No, he was. So I was positioned just beside the steps, maybe halfway. As the steps go up to my right, I was about halfway in, I guess, the middle of the steps, and not the middle of the steps, beside the steps, but halfway up. I could see up to my right. I could see Mr. Sarpe.
And what, if anything, occurred with Mr. Sarpe?
He seemed very upset that we were there, and he was, I guess because of our banging had disturbed him, and I don't remember the exact conversation, but he made it clear he didn't want us there. He said something to the effect of to go away or something of that nature. I don't recall exactly what.
Did you engage with him?
I did, and I know it's kind of uncommon. You know, somebody might be surprised you walk out of your door and you see a bunch of police officers in tax vests and gun belts. But I identified myself as a police officer, and I said, "Get back inside."
Did he comply with that?
Initially, no. He said a few more things, but it was very hard for me to understand him. I thought at the time it was because maybe he was intoxicated, or that's why he wasn't going back in, because usually when you tell somebody to come back in, or they come out by accident and see you getting ready to serve a search warrant at an adjacent apartment or wherever, they'll immediately go back inside.
But how long did your little discussion with him go?
I would say less than 10 seconds.
What was everybody else doing at that point?
Well, like I said, John had already began knocking on the door and announcing, and other people had said, and myself being one of them, had announced Metro Police search warrant.
And you announced that while you were talking with Mr. Sarpe?
No, sir. I'd announced that prior, and then Mr. Sarpe came out, and I believe things were kind of paused for a minute. Mr. Sarpe was argumentative, but like I said, it was brief. And Sergeant Mattingly yelled back at me and said, "Just forget about it, or don't worry about it." You know, and I don't remember the exact wording he used, but
And Brett, you just said things were paused for a minute. Was that a figure of speech, or was it for a minute?
It was how long it took for me to address to get him to go back inside.
And so he goes back inside, and then what happens?
We continued knocking and announcing.
And did you hear any response from inside of apartment 4?
I did not.
And then what?
I believe Lieutenant Hoover or Sergeant Mattingly, a commander, and that's who would give that, usually give that order, announced to go ahead and breach the door.
And what does that mean, to go ahead and breach the door?
It's the notification to the person holding the ram that it's okay, they're given the go to go ahead and start working on the door or whatever is obstructing our way to get in.
And Detective Nobles had the ram, correct?
He did.
And where were you at this point?
So after addressing Mr. Sarpé, I had moved up in the stack closer to the door, near Detective Nobles, to his, if this is the door and he's working on the door, I'm back to his right, behind him.
Did you have an assigned position?
I did not. We had the order on the whiteboard, but like I said, some people that were on the board weren't even there, and I believe maybe a person or two had showed up that wasn't even on the board. So other than the roles as it was, the pick, the ram, and the shield, those were specific known just because of the tools they were carrying up to the scene.
Somebody have a pick with them?
Not that I remember.
And Tony James had a ram, or had the shield, correct?
He did, and I did not know that was not mentioned. That's usually something you'll mention at the briefing or at least at the rally point. Somebody will say something, but I was not made aware that there was any ballistic shield until we got to the location and we began walking up on the sidewalk.
And I think we heard testimony from Detective Cosgrove by way of his deposition that normally the shield man would be the lead, correct?
Correct. We have very little training. I believe bunkers or shields, as they're referred to, are usually utilized by our SRT team, which is our special response team, or our SWAT team. And I may have seen some training done with it, but I didn't participate in a RAM entry that I can recall. I'm sorry, not a RAM entry, a shield entry.
So the shield didn't really come into play, is that correct?
No, sir.
At the time entry was made?
Correct.
Once the door, well, Noble starts hitting the door, correct?
Correct.
Are people still announcing, knocking, or they're not knocking anymore, are they announcing?
I believe maybe a person or two had said it again, louder than it started, and because of the banging with the ram.
And how many times did the ram hit the door, if you know?
I believe it was 3 times until the door was breached.
And what happened then?
At the third hit, Detective Nobles, and I'll explain this. The ram is a large cylindrical piece of steel, very heavy, and it has 2 handles on it that are they pivot or swivel rather. And so if you're the ram guy, you don't have access to your firearms or protection as it is. So while the ram guy is hitting the door, it's imperative that as soon as he breaches that door, there's somebody there for him to get out of the way, because he doesn't have an extra hand to get to his weapon should he face a threat. So it's imperative for that person or person behind him to fill his spot where that void is created, where he is in that area swinging that ram.
And we heard Detective Cosgrove say there was nobody behind him to fill that void. Is that correct?
I don't know where Detective Cosgrove was at, but I know from watching being right behind Detective Nobles, I know when you're swinging a ram, other detectives are very familiar that you don't stay close to the ram guy. So everybody kind of packs back or moves back, and it's a very small area, that breezeway, vestibule area. So everybody was positioned away from the ram, because obviously no one wants to get hit with the ram as he's swinging it back and forth.
You weren't assigned to fill in behind him, is that correct?
No, sir.
Okay. So what happened once that door comes open?
Once the door comes open, I move up to where Detective Nobles. So if this plexiglass was the door and Detective Nobles was hitting it with the ram, with his, I guess, from the left side of his body, after the third strike, that breached that door at the strike plate in the door handle area. Once that door was breached, Detective Nobles then pivoted back out, so towards me, behind me, which was would be the parking lot area.
And what did you do?
I immediately filled that void that was created by Detective Nobles moving with the ram out of the way.
And what did you see? Or what happened?
As I moved up and I was to the right side of the door, closest to the hallway, like I previously mentioned, I had my gun out already, down at the ready position, and I immediately could see. Let me rephrase. I immediately could see darkness in the apartment, no lights on, and then almost instantaneously I saw a large muzzle flash from directly in front of me where you would be, directly in front of me, a large muzzle flash. And I'll describe the muzzle flash more specifically, is that we do, as it was described by Detective or Officer Galehausen yesterday, the muzzle flash was not a muzzle flash that I would commonly identify as a handgun muzzle flash. This was a large fire muzzle flash that I could see directly in front of me, and then the percussion from that muzzle flash I could feel being, the percussion had nowhere to go. It was straight on at us, and I could feel the percussion. So I could see the muzzle flash, feel the percussion, and with the muzzle flash, it then gave illumination to that hallway. So at that time, I could see can I stand up, Judge?
Sure.
You may.
So I could see in the hallway, if you or me, I could see in the hallway a subject, and I could not tell if it was a male or a female, in a shooting stance at the ready here, and it lit up that figure. So if I'm where you're at, I see the muzzle flash, I get illumination from that muzzle flash, and then I can see a shadowy silhouette of a figure, and I couldn't identify whether it was a male or a female.
Could you tell whether there was more than one figure there?
I could not.
And you've previously, in your statement we saw played the other day, said you thought that individual was armed with a rifle, an AR-15.
Given the factors I just described to you, the large muzzle flash, the loud percussion or the boom of the gun, and the way the shooter was in a stance, it was what I would call a tactical or like an army stance or a tactical shooting stance. They were at the ready, already gun up on the door.
How could you see that if Sergeant Mattingly and Myles Cosgrove are in that doorway also?
And I don't know where Detective Cosgrove was, but Sergeant Mattingly was up front, and he was the one that was closest to, I guess, the door jamb when that door first came open. So he would have been in front of me. To my left, Detective Myles would have been, I don't know where Detective Myles was, I don't recall, I don't have any, even in the stack, I don't remember where he was at, but he had to have been somewhere to my left.
When you saw that muzzle flash, what's the next thing that happened?
Immediately, Sergeant Mattingly goes down.
Was anything said at that point?
I believe he said that he said I'm hit or I'm down, one or the other.
And is Sergeant Mattingly a friend of yours?
He is.
So when that happened, what did you do?
Well, where we're at, and this is trained in the academy, we were in that fatal funnel. It's been, I guess, touched on, but I'll describe more in detail. The fatal funnel is an area you don't want to be in on a search warrant. Okay, you want to get out of that area as quickly as possible. You're trained from day one. Do not stay in the fatal funnel. You have to go through the fatal funnel at some point to make entry into wherever you're getting entry into. So I knew facing that muzzle flash and there's an active shooter directly in front of me, we're not going to continue making entry into that apartment and taking rounds. I spun out to my left, kind of in a similar fashion that Detective Nobles did with the ram previously, and ran back through the breezeway. I did not want to be in the fatal funnel. I know that people die in the fatal funnel, as it is. Sergeant Mattingly is now to my left on the ground. So I want to get out of that fatal funnel as quickly as possible and get to a location where I can return rounds.
What do you know, was Sergeant Mattingly out of commission, or was he returning round?
I don't know.
How about Myles Cosgrove?
At that time, I did not know.
You don't know whether anybody was firing back, correct?
Correct.
Did you continue to hear rounds?
Yeah, the firing began as in the best of my memory, a volley back and forth, or two different guns. And as I made that corner back out towards the sliding glass door, I get illumination, a bright illumination from a muzzle flash. And the reason I say it's a muzzle flash is because it's a bright illumination, the bright flash, and with the loud percussion I get from what sounds to be rifle fire. And as I made that corner, that percussion, that muzzle flash intensified. intensified.
And was it your perception that that muzzle flash was coming from your brother officers?
No, sir.
What did you think?
I knew Sergeant, excuse me, I knew Sergeant Mattingly was down, and I knew they were trying to get to him. And it appeared to me that they were being executed with this rifle.
So what did you do?
I returned fire through, excuse me, through the sliding glass door. And that did not stop the threat.
What were you firing at?
The muzzle flashes that I could see in the apartment that were illuminated by that illuminated that sliding glass door.
And did you continue firing? Do you know how many rounds you discharged?
At that time, no, sir.
And did you continue firing?
I fired, and then I assessed. After firing through the sliding glass door, I assessed, and the firing continued.
And what did you do?
I moved from my left to my right from the breezeway towards the bedroom window that was now being illuminated by that muzzle flash. Okay, it's been testified to numerous times that there was a drape or blinds there, and that's accurate. But that was still lighting up that bedroom window. Both bedroom windows were still being lit up. So in my mind, I perceived that threat, which I clearly identified as a threat, an active threat. I thought that if I could get to that bedroom window, I could put rounds through that bedroom window and stop the shooter who, from the last place I had eyes on them, which was seconds before that.
Okay. How long did this go on, if you can estimate?
From the first shot,
Yes.
I would say
Did you fire the last shot?
after I returned fire through that bedroom window, the threat stopped. All firing ceased at that time, and in my mind, the threat was stopped or eliminated.
Okay. And are you able to estimate how long it was from the time the first shot that struck Sergeant Mattingly till your last shot?
I would say somewhere between 5 and 10 seconds.
That quick?
Correct.
Okay. After you fired your last round, what did you see and what did you do?
I could hear. Now, I didn't want to take my eyes off the target. I wasn't sure if the threat had been stopped or not. I knew Sergeant Mattingly was down. I could hear to my left. So if you remember when you were out at the scene, I was somewhere on the sidewalk area between bedroom 2 and the sliding glass door. I kept my gun and my attention on where the threat could come from. Now, we have a few different places in play, that being the front door, the sliding glass door, or the 2-bedroom windows. So I kept my attention focused on that. I knew that everyone else was in the process. I could hear a large commotion. It sounded like wrestling going on, but to my left. So out on the sidewalk, I knew Sergeant Mattingly, they had now got him out of the breezeway.
And where was everybody else?
Tending to Sergeant Mattingly to my left.
So you-
My left behind, but like I said, I never turned and looked because I didn't want to take my eye off the apartment in case the shooter advanced, which the whole time was my fear that the person with the rifle, the shooter, was going to advance out on us. I felt, I don't know what the best word to describe it is, I felt helpless knowing that I had a handgun and I was facing rifle fire, and even though I had a tactical vest on, I knew that was no match for if the shooter came out with the rifle.
And then what, they're all tending to Sergeant Mattingly? You've got your gun pointed at the apartment?
Correct.
And what, if anything, did you do?
I got on the radio. I knew that we went from 7 detectives to me. I later saw Detective Cosgrove to my left or on the sidewalk at some point, but at that time it was just me and the threat, because I know they were trying to evacuate or get Sergeant Mattingly treatment, and I knew that he was shot. I just didn't know. I didn't know what his status was.
So you got on the radio and did what?
I called at 10:30.
What's a 10:30?
Officer needs assistance.
And where did that go, do you know?
I had switched over from our narcotics channel to our primary channel, which is monitored by the patrol cars or patrol units. And I actually switched to the wrong channel, so I came over the downtown, as testified to yesterday by Sergeant Renaud, or Officer Renaud. My transmission came over his channel downtown, which is the 1st Division. And I yelled 10:30, officer needs assistance, and an officer was down.
And then what?
I asked responding units. I didn't want the patrol guys. Obviously, they didn't know anything about what was going on. I knew they had no knowledge. There was no patrol guys in the briefing or with us, and I knew they had no knowledge of what was going on, or a search warrant was even being served. We're not.
Let me interrupt you. How would they know where to come?
Well, that's the thing, is they didn't know. They didn't know where I was. I called 10:30 thinking that the dispatcher knew where I was at, but obviously they didn't, because I think they responded, "What is your location?" And was not in a position where I could remember or recall what address we were at. I had never been to Springfield before, and I was not familiar with the address.
But what'd you do?
Well, prior to leaving the office, I took a picture of the whiteboard with my cell phone. So, for various reasons, but because there were multiple locations, and if for some reason a dog couldn't search a certain area, I had those addresses in my phone. I could blow up on my phone and see where I would need to go to later without any confusion being called out for that.
Okay, so the question was, how did anybody know where to go?
So I looked at my phone, got the address, and I believe the address is written on the whiteboard as 3007 Springfield. So I put that address out, 3000 Springfield, number 4, on the radio channel.
Did you later learn it was not written as 3007?
That's what it looked like on my phone and the way it was written in the marker on the board.
Okay. So you put that out, and then what?
I was getting at, I knew the patrol guys that were coming, they didn't know what was going on, so they just knew 10:30, and that's really when shit hits the fan, and that's the worst thing you can hear on the radio. So I knew they were coming, but I didn't want them to pull up to the location and be faced with rifle fire immediately, especially pulling right up. And that, you know, a lot of us these days cheat and use our GPS for everything. We don't really look at house numbers anymore. We just kind of follow where the GPS goes and stop where the GPS tells us to. I didn't want that to happen. I knew that they were in the parking lot. When I say they, Sergeant Mattingly. And so I let them know on the radio, we need officers with long guns. I didn't want officers to come there necessarily without a long gun, because you obviously want to challenge a rifle with a rifle. You don't want to challenge a rifle with a handgun. So for officer safety purposes, I put that out on the radio that the shooter had a long gun, and to dispatch cars with rifles.
How long was this after Sergeant Mattingly was shot?
Well, this is all within that same minute time frame, less than a minute.
Less than a minute? So you call for long guns. Did you do anything else?
Yeah, I had positioned, so like I spoke of earlier, why we don't turn our flashlights on walking up to a location, I had taken I have a weapon mounted light, like I said, which is the one described earlier, and then I just have a Stinger, a small flashlight that we were just issued. I took my Stinger out of my vest and I placed it on the trunk of a vehicle near me. The reason being, I wanted to illuminate the target location as best as I could, and I also wanted to move away from that location. You don't want to be standing outside pointing with your gun or flashlight illuminated, and the shooter then has basically a target that she can acquire upon just looking right out or glancing out or advancing, whatever the case is. So, excuse me. I put the flashlight on the trunk or hood of a vehicle, and then I moved to cover so I could keep eyes on that location.
And what happened next then?
Sergeant Fan, who is actually my sergeant in the complaint response unit at that time, I was assigned to his platoon. He is also a member of SWAT team, and he was on Elliott when he heard this broadcast go out.
Did you communicate with him?
I did. He raised me on the radio or called for me on the radio.
While you're still keeping watch on apartment 4, correct?
Correct.
What did he want on the radio?
He wanted to let me know that they were en route from Elliott, which is in the West End, to my location, and he wanted to know if I could get him some pictures so they knew what they were facing when they got there.
And what did you do in response to that?
I took a couple pictures from the parking lot of the building and texted them to Sergeant Fan.
Are you just out in the middle of the parking lot, or were you behind cover?
I'm still in the parking lot back, like I said, behind cover. And at some point between calling the 10:30 and being in contact with Sergeant Fan, I did a reload in the parking lot. I did not know how many rounds I had or how many rounds I had left in my magazine.
And is that why one magazine had 4 rounds left in it?
Yes.
And that came out of your tactical vest at PIU, correct?
It came out of my magazine pouch, which is on my gun belt.
And your service revolver or service weapon at that time it had a fully loaded mag, correct, at the time that you were at PIU when it was taken from you?
I would have to look at the round count, but I believe it was either topped off or sometimes I will not put the last round in the magazine. Reason being is that I've had problems with it jamming on that first round. Once you get it in your gun, it seems like it feeds better with one round missing.
Okay. So you sent the pictures to Sergeant Fan. Meanwhile, are officers arriving?
The first officer that I didn't know who it was at the time, but now it's known to be Officer Combs. Now he came directly down the quickest way off of the main road, and I apologize, but it's either St. Andrews or St. Anthony, the one the apartment complex is off of. And he, I could see to my left that he was coming up lights and sirens, and that he had stopped because there's some random gate across between apartment complexes.
Did you communicate with him?
I did.
What'd you do?
I told him to ram the gate.
And why did you do that?
Well, like I said, if we can still use this as the apartment direction, which I believe is north, Sergeant Mattingly and the rest of the platoon I was there with, I heard at some point somebody called for a tourniquet or somebody said I had a tourniquet. And I believe Tony James or Detective James is one of the few detectives that carries a tourniquet on almost every time. He has one on his tack vest. And I remember him hearing saying that he had a tourniquet and he was going to apply it.
So what's that got to do with ramming the gate?
Well, for some reason, EMS was still not there. They were just at the bottom of the hill, but I think there was a miscommunication in MetroSafe, who dispatches for the police department, fire departments, and EMS. There was some type of communication delay letting them know that we needed EMS. Because as soon as you call 1030, I would assume, I don't know their protocol, but you would dispatch EMS when out there was an officer was down.
So Officer Combs rams the gate. Does that make the entire place accessible at that point?
To the best of my knowledge, I couldn't see everything that was going on back there, but I knew we had to get John out of where he was at behind me to my left to a safe location or out where EMS could get to him. And we couldn't do that because of this random gate that was blocking the parking lot across a couple of complexes, or separating two complexes.
So other officers began arriving?
They did.
And did you do anything with them?
After Officer Combs rammed the gate, we start getting a large, as you probably imagine, a large showing of officers anytime there's a 1030. That's one of those calls on the radio where it doesn't matter what you're doing or where you're at in the county, as described by First Division officer yesterday, and he was at First and Jefferson, I think he said, and that's quite a ways away. You respond to that scene until somebody tells you otherwise on the radio that officer doesn't need help anymore.
Okay. When those officers began arriving, what do they do?
So a lot of the officers, I was happy to see a lot of the officers were running up to the scene with long guns already out, like I requested on the radio. I then directed them to what apartment was in play, meaning this isn't the whole complex we're covering this apartment. I had my flashlight, like I said, illuminated on the apartment complex, or the apartment 4, and I pointed out to them what was in play, specifically the front door, the breezeway, and both bedroom windows. I positioned them, fanned them out through the parking lot behind cover. A couple of them had tripods on their ARs, and they positioned in a cover position. That was the safest way to do it.
Did you send people around the back?
At that time, I don't believe I sent anyone around back, but that was my major concern at the time. That became a concern of mine at the time, not a major concern. But I was concerned that this shooter, I knew we didn't have the back addressed at any point in the briefing, and I knew that everybody that came out of the stack went to the apartment. And a lot of times we'll have an assigned person, or 2 people usually. There's usually no less than 2 people assigned to the back to cover the back of the target location. And I remembered we didn't have anybody covering the back. So in my mind, this person can or is going out this back window or a back door, or I didn't know the layout, into the night. So at some point I said we need people around back to make sure this person is not, escaping.
To your knowledge, is there still a person in apartment 4?
Yes, sir.
How did you know that?
Because I saw them, and then they never came. They had not exited at this point.
Okay, you saw them when the door was breached?
Correct.
Okay, did you know that anybody was shot in the apartment?
I did not.
As far as you knew, there was one person in the apartment when you went there, correct?
Correct, and the reason is that I think I stated before, they told us in the briefing that Miss Taylor was there by herself. There was no kids, no dogs, no other people in the apartment, and that she, because of constant surveillance, and I think I spoke of it earlier, but while we leave that staging area at the church and make our way up, Detective Campbell confirms that there was no change. And just saying no change on the radio means there's nobody came, nobody has gone. So in my mind, the person that's in that apartment, there is only one person in the apartment as confirmed by what I was told at the briefing and constant surveillance. Nobody else was in there.
So how did you learn that there was still an individual in the apartment?
I began to hail them from now that we had cover officers and we had long guns. I began to call them out.
Was Sergeant Mattingly still on the scene?
No. I believe EMS finally made it up there, and they were down farther now towards the main road, St. Andrews or St. Anthony, I'm not sure. EMS had now moved down to that location. I could no longer hear the people that were tending to Sergeant Mattingly with me.
Do you know how he got to the ambulance?
I have no idea.
So you started calling somebody out of the apartment.
Correct.
Why did you do that?
Well, now that I had sufficient officers there, I felt it was an appropriate time to call that person out.
And you knew that somebody was still in there.
I did.
Okay, and what happened when how did you start calling the person out?
I believe I said, person inside apartment 4, come out with your hands up.
And what happened?
Moments later, a subject later known to me as Kenneth Walker emerged from apartment 4.
And how did he emerge?
I believe he had his hands up or his hands down to his side like this, and I know he had a cell phone in one of his hands. I don't recall which hand.
What did you do?
I had him immediately turn around and do what we would do in like a felony traffic stop, which is call the person out of the car and usually have them have their hands up. We'll have them turn around. That way we can see as best as we can, depending on clothing, around their midsection and see if they have any firearms or weapons.
And when Mr. Walker came out, you had him turn around. Did he comply with that?
He did.
And was he walking backwards?
He was, but then he would stop to say he didn't understand, or I don't remember the exact exchange, but he wasn't following directions. And he would I would say keep walking back, and he would say move to the side or take a couple of side steps. I don't remember which, but it wasn't exactly what I was saying to do.
Did he eventually comply with you and come out?
He did.
Did you call him all the way out, or did somebody else intervene?
I called him out, I believe, almost to the sidewalk area, and then maybe he wasn't to the sidewalk area yet, but I remember Detective Nemo. Now, that is also a canine officer, but that is a patrol canine. So he has a canine which is trained to do the other opposite of what I was explaining to you guys earlier. He's actually in the canine. He has a uniform on, and he has a large dog.
So he took over calling Mr. Walker?
He did. It seemed that Mr. Walker wasn't very responsive, and then when the dog got there and the dog was lunging and barking, it seemed to have gotten Mr. Walker's attention, and then he complied with Detective Nemo right away.
Were you still there?
I was.
Did you have a conversation with Mr. Walker?
Well, not yet, but after we got Mr. Walker down to his knees and on the ground, then I applied handcuffs, and that's when the conversation ensued.
And what was the nature of that conversation?
Mr. Walker asked what this was all about, and I would refer specific conversation or specific wording to the body cam, because there was a patrol officer, and I think Officer Nemo with K9 had a body camera on also, so that conversation was recorded. But it was to the effect that he wanted to know what was going on. I said, "You shot the police." And he said, "I did not shoot the police." And I said, "Well, who did?" And he said, "My girlfriend." And he said, "She shot you with her 9. And I said, "Well, where is she at?" Because I had no idea there was another person inside at all. And he said, "She's dead inside."
And what did you do then?
That kind of shook me, because there was only supposed to be one person in that apartment, and now there was allegedly a girl dead inside, and that wasn't why we were there. We were there to get documents and/or items that related to a boyfriend that was drug trafficking, and that happened to visit that location. And now, I didn't know, it wasn't confirmed yet, so I wasn't sure what Mr. Walker said was true. But the SWAT team arrived seconds after that had happened, or seconds after we had got him in handcuffs, and that the patrol officer took Mr. Walker to a car. I couldn't confirm that, and I wasn't in a position to go in and confirm or get medical treatment because the SWAT team had arrived, or a couple of them had arrived, and at that point, that's when tactically they will take over a situation like that until everything is secured. So, in my mind, I was under the impression that we came into a scene where there had been something happened previously, and he said she's dead. I thought immediately it's because he had killed his girlfriend or there was a domestic. I didn't know what. A bunch of thoughts went through my head on why this female was dead inside, and that it was imperative, that we get in there to confirm that or get her medical attention.
Did you eventually go up to the door?
I did.
That was after SWAT was there?
Correct.
And what would you do there?
SWAT had cleared. I watched from the parking lot. SWAT had cleared the apartment, and I don't know a lot of the SWAT guys' names, but and they have helmets on and glasses and all kinds of stuff. So I couldn't identify who I talked to. I would have to refer to the body cam that was played previously. But one of the SWAT guys was exiting as I approached the door, and I was concerned, one, that there was somebody down inside, and I believe he confirmed, or I could visually see what I would learn to be Miss Taylor in the hallway of the apartment complex, or I'm sorry, not the apartment complex, of the hallway of the apartment, and that confirmed what Mr. Walker had said.
And did you also ask about a gun?
I did. I asked if they saw a long gun. Long guns or AR-15s, rifles, are extremely hard to. I would say it would be visible as SWAT would clear it, and I asked them if they had seen this long gun or AR-15. I don't remember the way I worded it, and the reason so is that I still was unaware of where that gun or person was, because I thought, like I alluded to earlier, this person may have fled out a back door or a back window of the apartment. And I believe somewhere in there was some radio transmission that came over and said they had a subject exiting in red shorts. And I think they said a male in red shorts. I don't remember the race given, but it was a male in red shorts came over. It was either the TAC channel or the primary channel, and they observed him, which I did not know until we watched the body cam video of Officer Renaud, I think was the one that challenged Mr. Etherington at that back or that patio window of apartment 3.
When did you first learn that apartment 3 existed?
I believe it was in your office.
My office. When did you first hear of Cody Etherton or Chelsea Napper?
I don't remember the first place I heard those names.
Did you learn that your bullets went into their apartment?
I did.
And what did you think about that?
I was pretty shook because I found out later that Miss Napper testified they had a small child in there, and I felt horrible.
But you didn't know of their existence? Did you ever see Cody Etherton that
I never
night?
met any of them at any point.
Did you ever see Cody Etherton come out of the apartment door and into the vestibule?
No, sir.
After you went up and looked in apartment 4, what did you do at that point?
Went back to the parking lot and kind of over near my vehicle, which was near the dumpster.
Okay, we've heard testimony that you should have been assigned a peer support or escort officer. Did that happen?
That did not.
And do you know why?
I don't, because I was never aware of such a policy existed.
Okay, we heard testimony that as SWAT was approaching, one of the officers indicated that he saw you on the sidewalk pointing to your chest and pointing to the sliding glass window. Did you do that?
I believe I did.
And why would you have done that?
It appeared to me that, and I hadn't spoke with SWAT as far as what went on prior other than putting out the call for service on the radio and texting those pictures of Sergeant Van with the SWAT team. But it appeared they were trying to assess maybe what had happened. That's not their role, but I think they were kind of just in the parking lot, and I was letting Officer Kitchen and I used to work together a long time ago back in the 6th Division in Newburgh, and I was familiar with him. I wasn't familiar with a lot of the other guys on the SWAT team, but I was familiar with him specifically, and I wanted to let him know that I was the one, those were my rounds that went through the sliding glass door. Because we were kind of standing out in the parking lot, but on the sidewalk in front of that.
And why would it be important for them to know that those were your rounds that went through the window?
I guess so. I was responsible for those rounds. It appeared to me they were trying to maybe piece it together or understand what had happened.
Were you concerned that they might think the rounds came from the other direction?
I think that would be a concern prior to them clearing the apartment. Yes.
They'd already cleared the apartment?
Correct.
Okay. So what'd you do after, how long did you remain in the parking lot? I assume by that time it was full of police cars and detectives and all kinds of people, correct?
Yeah, investigators and PIU, I think. I stayed there long enough for PIU. I think I saw a couple people from PIU, and I couldn't quote. I don't know a lot of people in PIU's names. I know their faces, but I don't know their names. And usually they're the people in suits that show up, and I recognized a couple of PIU personnel arriving on scene.
And did anybody speak with you?
No.
Were you speaking to anybody?
No, I was down away from the scene, like I said, towards my vehicle near the dumpster.
And what did you do next?
I then proceeded to the hospital.
Are you aware that there's allegedly a protocol that you go straight to PIU if you're involved in a shooting?
I've never heard of that protocol.
And you've never been involved in a shooting before?
I have not.
Okay, why did you go to the hospital?
I needed to check on John.
Did you in fact check on John?
I did. I proceeded to U of L Hospital, and I went back immediately to the triage area, the ER triage area, and I believe I asked one of the nurses where Sergeant Mattingly was in a room all the way back corner farthest away from the entrance, so I couldn't see any people. I did recognize immediately Chief Conrad, who was in uniform.
Okay, did you speak with Jon Mattingly?
I did.
And how did you communicate with him?
I went in. I kind of pulled the curtain on his bed, and went in and checked on him.
And what was his condition at that point?
He seemed to be. He was talking. Excuse me. He was not alert. I don't know if he was under. Excuse me. I don't know if he was medicated at that time or if it was just he was out of it from shock of the whole situation.
Okay, did you have a conversation with Chief Conrad?
I did. After I hugged John, I told him I was glad he was okay. I exited the curtain area, John's bed area, temporary bed area, and then proceeded over to Chief Conrad.
And why did you proceed to Chief Conrad?
As an officer in the chief's there, you want to acknowledge the chief, obviously. Chief shook my hand, and he said, "I'm glad you guys are okay. It looks like John's going to make it, and I'm glad you guys are okay."
You recall his testimony that you were visibly shaking?
I do.
And were you?
I don't recall shaking at that time, but I don't think that would be. I was very shaken, so I wouldn't say that was a impossible thing to happen. I don't recall physically shaking, no.
After you left the hospital, what did you do?
I proceeded directly to the PIU office.
What occurred at the PIU office?
Counsel, would you approach for a moment, please?
Okay, Brett, what did you do at the PIU office?
there was nobody, or there was a different personnel arriving at the PIU office. I believe the CSU or the crime scene unit responds, and I think they're the ones responsible for taking pictures and all that type of thing. And then different investigators from PIU showed up in the meantime.
And did you make any statements that night, or were you requested to make any statements?
I was not. I turned over my firearm and my magazines and the still stand-up pictures, which I think we've all seen that are in the record. Those pictures were taken at the PIU office.
Okay. And then approximately 12 days or so later, you were requested to come in and make a statement, is that right?
That's correct.
And you did that?
I did.
And is that the statement we watched on the screen the other day?
That's correct.
And did you tell the entire truth in that?
I did.
Is there anything, Brett, that you feel like you did wrong on March 13th at 3003 Springfield Drive?
Absolutely not.
Why did you do what you did?
To protect myself, and more importantly, and first, primary function at that time when I returned fire was to protect the fellow detectives that were stuck in that breezeway.
And did you later learn that, you obviously at some point learned that your bullets had gone into an apartment behind Breonna Taylor's apartment?
Correct.
What were your feelings about this entire incident?
Tragedy. It's something that didn't have to happen. And my opinion is that certain actions by...
Sustained.
Okay. Is there anything else, Brett, that I haven't asked you that you think it's important for this jury to hear?
Yes. I just, I saw Ms. Napper, Mr. Etherington up here for the first time, and I felt sincere empathy for them. That was something, if my daughter was shot at or bullets came into our house, that would be very concerning, and I apologize to her for that. And Miss Taylor's family, it was just, she didn't need to die that night.
Approach, please.
Judge, I have no further questions of Detective Hankison.
All right, thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, this will be a good time for us to go ahead and take our lunch break. So it's 12 o'clock. Let's recess until 1:15. Please remember the separation admonition. Deputy Sheriff Anthony will escort you out, and then I will see you back to resume the trial at 1:15.